Since drones became the dominant weapon on the Ukrainian battlefield, much of the attention has been placed on how those drones are great at taking out tanks. Ukraine has the numbers to back that up. Over 11,100 Russian tanks and counting have been destroyed, many by drones. But now tanks are about to get their own back. Only it's Ukraine's Leopard tanks that will be taking out Russia's drones. With this latest upgrade, Ukraine's Leopards will be able to shred Russia's drone-based air force, and it'll be able to do it cheaper than anybody ever imagined. On September 9th, the Kyiv Independent reported that pen has been put to paper and a deal has been inked that will see the German defense manufacturer Rheinmetall provide Skyranger mobile air defense systems to Ukraine. It's unknown exactly how many Skyrangers will be sold to Ukraine, though Rheinmetall CEO Armin Paperga says that the contract is worth hundreds of millions of euros. According to Forbes, a single Skyranger gun costs a cool $12 million, which suggests that Ukraine will be receiving several dozen of these defensive assets. The contract was signed on September 10th, with Rheinmetall adding that the first of the Skyranger units will be heading to Ukraine by the end of 2025. All of this will be big enough news on its own. Ukraine is crying out for more air defense systems as Russia intensifies its drone and missile strikes. In the wake of a July drone strike in which 15 people were injured across Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky said, "Russia is not changing its strategy. To counter this terror effectively, we need to systematically strengthen our defenses, more air defense systems, more interceptors, and more determination so that Russia feels our response." The Skyranger is definitely a weapon that will make Russia feel Ukraine's response. However, the real headline here isn't the arrival of these systems into Ukraine, it's what they'll be mounted to: Leopard 1 tanks. These old German tanks, of which Ukraine has hundreds, with many more in the pipeline, are set to become mobile air defense systems in a move that flips the tank aspect of the Ukraine war on its head. Since the start of the war, Russia has been trying to use its tanks to overwhelm Ukraine's defenses, though it's experienced massive losses as a result. As drones become more prevalent on the battlefield, using tanks is riskier than ever, so Ukraine is getting ready to flip the script by turning tanks that it may no longer be able to use in assaults into air defense systems it can transport to any location when they're needed. The Kyiv Independent says that each Leopard that packs a Skyranger will be able to secure a 2.5 by 2.5 mile area, with the tank being capable of providing full protection against incoming drone threats. This is a concept Rheinmetall has been working on for a while. UA Wire adds that the German defense company has figured out how to integrate Skyranger onto Leopard tanks, rather than the Boxer armored personnel carriers that typically serve as the massive gun's mount. In doing so, it has essentially created a weapon that allows Ukraine to transport its artillery and anti-air systems over rough terrain, creating a full-fledged ground-based air defense asset in the process. There are other advantages to loading Skyranger onto a tank other than enhanced mobility. UA Wire points out that these upgraded Leopards can be deployed with other tracked vehicles, which offer protection for the tanks loaded with Skyrangers. Plus, Leopard's modules weigh about 4.5 tons and have large tank chassis. That size offers plenty of space for target detection and tracking systems to be loaded onto the tank, which can be deployed as needed, along with plenty of room for the many rounds of ammunition that Skyranger fires. We'll be talking more about that ammunition in a moment. It's a huge reason why the Skyranger is such a valuable air defense system. But first, let's take a closer look at the Skyranger. The Kyiv Independent delivers the basics, noting that the Skyranger is from the same family of German air defense systems as Skynex, of which Germany has already provided 2 to Ukraine. Skynex is interesting in its own right as it's a modular air defense system that allows the user to network several air defense assets to create a layered aerial shield that coordinates perfectly. Rheinmetall calls Skynex the necessary answer against saturation and swarm attacks in the future, and Skyranger may be the most important part. Think of Skyranger as a portable version of Skynex. It can be mounted onto vehicles, as already established, and it's essentially a massive cannon capable of blowing drones out of the sky. Interestingly, Ukraine has several options when it comes to this cannon. The first variant is a 35 by 228mm KDG revolver cannon that can rattle off rounds at targets about 13,100 feet away. The second version, which is a 30 by 173mm cannon, has a range of about 9,840 feet. Add an array of tracking sensors, which can be stored inside the Leopard, and you basically have a very big gun that is the perfect counter to Russia's Shahid drones. Army Technology offers more information, including the fact that the Skyranger can fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute. It's this rapid rate of fire that makes it such a great choice for dealing with drone swarms, as the cannon can fill the sky with rounds, creating a wall of explosive metal that's almost impossible for a drone to break through. There's also more to Skyranger than just one big cannon. The system also comes with a 7.62mm coaxial machine gun, with the Skyranger 30 variant of the system shipping with 252 of the cannon rounds and 1,000 7.62mm rounds. Skyrangers also come with a pair of smoke grenade launchers, each loaded with 9 grenades, which help to obscure them as they fire or when they're making their escape. In some cases, Skyrangers can also be shipped with a pair of short-range air defense missiles, meaning they can also be effective against Russia's long-range missiles. We don't know which version of Skyranger Ukraine will be getting. It might be able to mix and match between the various cannons and options for missiles, though nobody will know until the new Leopard-based Skyrangers are roaming the Ukrainian battlefield. What we do know is that it's not just the Skyranger itself that should have Russia worried about the future success of its drone swarms. The rounds the weapon fires are the most important aspect of the system. Assuming Ukraine receives a 35mm version of Skyranger, it will be able to unleash a barrage of Oerlikon Ahead rounds on Russia's drones. These are special rounds. Rather than striking a target directly, which would mean they have to be fired perfectly, an Ahead round approaches the target only to explode before it strikes. That explosion doesn't just unleash a fireball, it sends a massive cluster of tungsten sub-projectiles into the sky, which envelop the target and shred it to pieces. A Russian Shahid-type drone doesn't stand a chance against this projectile swarm. Such drones aren't fast enough to avoid the Ahead rounds, and they're certainly not strong enough to keep flying after dozens of small pieces of fast-moving tungsten have ripped through their bodywork. Rheinmetall offers some more information, noting that Ahead rounds have already been adopted by 12 of the world's armed forces, and that there are now versions of the ammunition specifically designed to deal with certain threats. For instance, there is an anti-missile Ahead variant, which Ukraine may find extremely useful if its Skyrangers don't come with a pair of air defense missiles mentioned earlier. The high kinetic energy, the optimized shape, and the hardness of the sub-projectiles offer excellent penetration performance in steel, aluminium, or composite structures, Rheinmetall says. The spin-stabilized sub-projectiles form a defined cone, allowing repeatable and verifiable sub-projectile saturation levels to be reached for any chosen standoff distance in front of the target. Translation: whatever the Ahead hits, it kills. Russia's Shahids won't stand a chance. And that brings us back to the Leopard tanks that are soon to be equipped with these Skyrangers and what they'll mean for the Ukraine war moving forward. First, Leopards loaded with Skyrangers could redefine both tank warfare and Ukraine's air defenses. On the tank front, Ukraine has an opportunity to finally put tanks that it may have been keeping out of the field to better use. On September 8th, Sensor.net published an interview with a Da Vinci unit soldier named Volodymyr Lutsyk. Though Lutsyk spent the majority of the interview talking about how he and his teammates have been stealing Russia's tanks to use against them since the beginning of the war, he also explained why tanks are less useful now than they were in 2022. "I keep asking our armor group not to burn Russian tanks, but to hit them in a way that lets us use them afterward. But the war has changed. Our drones now torch enemy vehicles while they're still approaching our lines," Lutsyk told Sensor.net. Of course, if Ukraine's drones are capable of torching Russia's tanks, then Russia's drones can do the same to Ukraine's Leopards. So using Leopards in frontal assaults carries more risk than ever. A single, well-aimed drone could take the tank out. But hiding the Leopard away so that it's ready to fire on any long-range Russian drones that threaten Ukraine, that's a great way to make these old tanks useful again. By the way, we've published a video covering Lutzyk's interview in detail, along with explaining how Ukraine has been using Russia's own tanks against it. Check out that video if you want more insight into how the tank aspect of the Ukraine war has evolved over the last 3 years. The War Zone, or TWZ, also published a piece back in June where it proclaimed that Ukraine's old Leopard tanks could be reborn with the addition of Skyranger air defense systems. At the time, Rheinmetall was assessing whether it was even possible to integrate Skyranger into Leopard, showing us that this evolved version of the tank has gone from concept to execution in the space of 2 or 3 months. Offering the Skyranger 35 turret combined with the veteran Leopard 1 and the Leopard 2 reflects a broader growing interest in SHORADs after many years of neglect by many armed forces, epitomized by the fact that the Gepard was essentially a dying breed in NATO before the war in Ukraine, TWZ says. Gepards are another German air defense system that Ukraine is using, while SHORADs are short-range air defense systems. TWZ implies these systems fell out of favor for many years with NATO countries, likely because they were more focused on the threat presented by ballistic missiles and similar long-range projectiles. With the emergence of long-range drones, which move slowly enough for cannons to target, SHORADs are becoming more popular again. The Leopard plus Skyranger combination is an example of creating a makeshift SHORAD that has the potential to be lethal. TWZ explains how, adding, "These tanks provide a highly mobile air defense solution and are both immediately available, with the Leopard 2 also still in production." That's an interesting idea. While the focus right now is on integrating Skyranger into Leopard 1 tanks, which Ukraine has in abundance, it seems likely that these powerful air defense systems will soon find their way onto Leopard 2s. And given that the Skyranger is a NATO-aligned weapon, there's a good chance it will be compatible with tanks produced by other Western countries. Ukraine's upgraded Leopards may end up acting like a proof of concept for an idea that may soon become widespread throughout NATO. When tanks can't be used for assaults, use them for air defense. Coming back to the Leopard 1 for a moment, it's an excellent choice to test this new concept. The tanks are among the oldest in Ukraine's arsenal, having been introduced in 1965. But even with their advanced age, these tanks can travel for up to 370 miles on roads and 280 miles across country, hitting a top speed of 40 miles per hour in the process. That combination of range and speed makes the Leopard the perfect platform for the Skyranger. Ukraine can deploy its new air defense system quickly and even move into the perfect position to fire on a drone threat, followed by moving again to fire onto the next. And it's Russia's drone threat that is the major problem that Ukraine faces right now. Russia has been relying on its Shahid-type drones more heavily than ever before in 2025. We can see that in the figures for July 2025 alone. In that month, the Kyiv Independent reports Russia launched a record-breaking 6,129 drones at Ukraine, which smashed the record of 5,337 from the previous month. However, it's the comparison between July 2025 and July 2024 that's really concerning. In July 2024, Russia launched just 423 drones, meaning it's increased its volume a staggering 14 times over the space of a single year. This isn't a one-off. Russia's strategy for most of 2025 has been to terrorize Ukraine's cities more than it ever has before. On September 9th, Al Jazeera published an interesting graph showing how Russia's drone assaults have increased since the beginning of the year. Between January and May, Russia was hitting Ukraine with plenty of drones, but the numbers per strike weren't unreasonable. For instance, January saw an approximate average of about 120 to 130 drones used per strike. Things started ramping up toward the end of May, right after Ukraine and Russia held bilateral talks in Istanbul. Those talks, which many hope would bring the two nations closer to a peace agreement, delivered nothing but what seems to be a Russian decision to start using more drones than ever before. By the end of May, Russia had several days where it used over 250 drones per strike, with one of its strikes using close to 400, Al Jazeera's graph reveals. And it just keeps getting worse. Every time there is some major development in the Ukraine war, a massive drone strike seems to follow. After Ukraine and Russia held their second round of Istanbul peace talks, Russia struck Ukraine with about 500 drones. After Putin and the US President Donald Trump held a phone call in early July, Russia immediately attacked Ukraine with 750 drones in a single day. The August Alaska summit was accompanied by a strike featuring nearly 550 drones, followed by two that exceeded 550. And in September, Russia broke its record for the most drones and missiles it's launched at Ukraine, with 823 in a single night. There are a couple of interesting patterns here. The first is obvious. Russia's drone assaults have grown more intense as 2025 has marched on. They were already showing signs of being heavier than in 2024. But the second half of 2025 showcases Russia going all in on its drone swarms. Second, Putin seems to have developed a habit of marking every big potential turning point in the Ukraine war with a heavy drone strike. Those he orders after his conversations with Trump indicate a man who is either rubbing Trump's nose in his failure to secure a peace deal, or is so confident that the US is wrapped around his finger that he can get away with escalating as he talks of peace. It's against this backdrop of constantly escalating drone assaults that Ukraine's Skyranger-equipped Leopards enter the fray, and they're arriving not a moment too soon. Putin has made it clear that he wants Russia to ramp up its drone production, as he has finally realized that unmanned aerial vehicles are the most important asset available to his military. In August, the Kyiv Independent reported that Russia plans to build 79,000 Shahid drones in 2025 alone. And Putin wants the country to get to the point where it could launch 2,000 drones at Ukraine in a single day. Russia's drones aren't going away. If anything, the already intense strikes we're seeing now are only going to get worse. Having an air defense system that is mobile, designed to destroy drones, and cheaper than almost every other option that Ukraine has, is going to prove vital as the Ukraine war drags on into 2026. And that mention of cheapness brings us to the final reason why Ukraine's upgraded Leopard tanks have the potential to be a game changer in its air defense. Ehrlich ahead rounds cost a lot less than the missiles and rounds that other air defense systems use. Let's take a look at the numbers. According to the Kyiv Independent, Russia spends anywhere between $10,000 and $50,000 on each of its Shahid-type drones that it builds domestically. If it imports those drones from Iran, they cost a much steeper $193,000 per unit, though that price pales in comparison to some of the missiles Ukraine has been forced to use to shoot those drones down. Starting with the most advanced air defense system Ukraine has, the Patriot missiles cost around $4 million each. Ukraine can't afford to waste these missiles on drones that could cost up to 400 times less to produce, which means the Patriot is out as a drone defense option. NASAM missiles, though cheaper, can run Ukraine between $600,000 and $1 million, which is still far too high for taking out Shahid-type drones. Iris-T missiles are cheaper still at $450,000, but that means Ukraine is still spending over double what Russia spends on its imported Shahids just to take out a drone. Then there's the ahead round. Not only is that round designed to shred drones specifically into pieces, but it only costs around $4,000 per unit. That's around $6,000 less than Russia's cheapest Shahids. And the ahead design means that Ukraine doesn't have to fire tons of them into the sky to take out a drone. In some cases, 1 or 2 ahead rounds could be enough to take out several Shahids, depending on how closely Russia's drone swarms fly together. Even if Ukraine went down the full rapid-fire mode with its ahead rounds, it could rattle off about 112 of them before it matches the cost of an Iris-T missile, up to 250 before hitting the cost of a NASAM, and a staggering 1,000 rounds for the equivalent cost of a single Patriot missile. This is where Ukraine's Skyranger-equipped Leopards will shine. Ukraine is getting an upgrade to tanks it already has that is far cheaper to operate and can take out many more drones in a single engagement than almost any of its other drone defense systems. The only questions remaining are how many upgraded Leopards will Ukraine be getting and how many ahead rounds will it receive? The answers to those questions will ultimately determine how large an impact this impressive new air defense system will have. Russia also has problems on the defensive front, as Ukraine is getting an evolved version of the Leopard tank that can take Russia's drones out. It's also developing missiles that can hit Russia in its deep rear. The Hell missile has already decapitated several Russian HQs, and that's only the beginning. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the latest innovative weapons Ukraine receives from its Western partners. And thank you as always for watching.